Hi. So I'm cooking dinner, but I wanted to make a quick video. Recently I adopted this prayer of Holy Spirit flood me, and before that I would have used something like overwhelm me or baptize me, and those are great. Not there's anything wrong with that, but I just sort of like had in mind. I just sort of conjured in mind something like an image of like an immense waterfall falling down on me, which is great. I want Holy Spirit to overwhelm me with His presence by just being the waterfall that is like a torrent coming down. That would be awesome. Um, but I really wanted something more about like my day to day life. You know, Obviously, like those kinds of waterfall moments are great, but that can't be constant all the time. I don't know how I would get anything done. Um, and using like a word like just simply overflow. That was a good word. That kind of just points to like this idea of like a bucket that you're filling, and at some point it's so full it's just overflowing, and that's great too. I want that too. I want it to spill over. My cup runneth over, as the King James says. But that just still wasn't quite what I was looking for. And you know so I would lose like this word of like fill me up and overflow, because overflow by itself just kind of seemed like it was just focusing on the spilling over part, but I wanted like the filling too. And so I wanted something that would sort of capture that. And one day, um in church, a speaker used the word flood, and he talked about being flooded with the Holy Spirit and what the word flood means. And what came to mind was just this image of like a little stream running, right? And it's just trickling down, and in this dry riverbed. But then all of a sudden, whatever's happening, like there's more water and it starts flowing. But before the water level off the the riverbed actually starts rising, the dry ground surrounding this little trickle has to become wet. And so you have this little trickle coming down this dry riverbed, and the water, as it increases, it starts saturating the riverbed, so it's no longer dry and cracked anymore. And it making it wet. The rocks are wet, and then it starts rising, and it rises until it's full, and then it starts overflowing uh, the riverbed. But as it overflows the riverbed, it's not just like suddenly water, like an inch of water running out. But first, as it overflows, it has to saturate the surrounding ground too. And then once the surrounding ground is saturated to full, then it's okay. Now we have an inch of water outside the riverbed. Now we have 2 inches, and it just keeps spreading that way. And so there's this idea of saturation, filling, more saturation of what's surrounding it as it overflows. And so it's not just this idea of a vessel being filled, but of, you know, it's such a more organic image. And it really spoke to me. And so my prayer has just been lately, Holy Spirit, fill me. And, as I was thinking about this in church, the Holy Spirit pointed out the way we use the word flood. There's this thing called emotional flooding, where you talk about being like overwhelmed by the situation or emotionally flooded, triggered, all these things, which usually elicits not a great response. And so the question that Holy Spirit asked was like, what would it look like if when you got flooded? He said, what would it look like when were flooded emotionally, when you were triggered, when you were overwhelmed? What would it look like for what overflowed from you, what flooded out of you was me? That was just like, wow, man, I don't know, but flood me. And so that's just been my prayer lately. And as I just think about that, those simple words, Holy Spirit, flood me, there's like this desperate plea to be saturated, filled, and overflowing with the presence of God. And and it's like, what would happen if instead of anger or frustration or anxiety or yelling, harsh words, blame, defensiveness, any of these false refuge coping mechanisms, what if instead of any of that, just Spirit, Holy Spirit. Just I'm pressed, and just the oil of the Spirit is just oozing out of every pore. That's that's the aim of practicing the presence of God. That's what I'm hoping in these last couple of videos about practicing the presence of God. That's what I'm wanting to achieve. I'm wanting to just be so full. And it's just a matter of letting God have his way and letting God fill me and just being surrendered to learn his paths, learn his ways, and follow him. Jesus said that the fundamental task that Jesus gives to his disciples is follow me. And that's where it starts, is submitting to our King and letting his spirit fill us. And so when I sit and do nothing, I'm still and I'm resting. I turn my awareness to him to see what he might do. And I just say, flood me. And hope that in those moments that his presence is saturating, filling, cleansing me even beyond my awareness. And often all I'm aware of is just simply his presence. Or maybe I'm not even that aware. I just know that he's there. But I don't have any sign to focus on. But I just focus on that knowledge, and I just entrust everything to him. I entrust myself to him, my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, the day, everything that's going on around me. And as I do this, I just trust that he's working in me. And I fantasize about a day when I get emotionally flooded or overwhelmed, and instead of anxiety or yelling or whatever, it's just an overflow of him, and revivals and miracles start happening all around me because someone triggered me, and instead of some great explosive anger, or I instead of running away to hide somewhere, or instead of shutting down, or whatever my response may be in the moment, instead of any of that, it's just the presence of God filling every space, every corner of the room, every heart, every mind. Man, would be pretty awesome. Anyway, I just want to share those thoughts, and hope it blesses you. Thanks.